especially with fear, is getting really honest with what I'm scared about. Because I think there was a time in my life before I started to get into a more kind of recovery and healing mindset that I really thought I was fearless. But I really think what it was is I was just stupid.
Lady Balls Radio, a celebration of women bold enough to live their truth and inspiration for others to do the same. Welcome back, Lady Balls Nation. I know a lot of you who are listening to this show are in the middle of, pondering or just on the other side of a big old transition in your life. Well, we have a serious treat in store for us today because our guest is going to share her story that's led to her life's calling and discuss ways we can all more clearly navigate our own path. Caitlin Talbot is a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. She went on to earn an MFA in acting from the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, where she starred in the play Orlando. Caitlin also co-produced and co-starred in Tula in 2014, a short dramatic film shot in South Africa. Screened at film festivals in Cannes, Los Angeles, Durban, South Africa, Tula had its U.S. television debut on Magic Johnson's Aspire network. She co-founded Hollywood Power Yoga Studio, right here in Hollywood, and she currently teaches yoga in the San Francisco Bay Area. Caitlin joins us today after a recent life-changing trip to Kenya and is about to embark on a career in healing, which we will be diving into deeper into this show. So welcome, Caitlin. I am so thrilled to have you here today with us. I've practiced with you so many times and I've had that great pleasure. I am just so psyched to do this interview with you today. So
Thank
welcome.
you so much, Connie. I'm delighted to be here.
Yay.
I miss having you in class.
Oh, thank you. And I have to say, we'll talk more about this later when we get into what you're about to embark on. But
Yeah.
I was telling a couple of people you were going to be on the show, and the reaction was always like, "Oh, she had the most incredible touch." Like they would always talk about your adjustments.
Oh, wow.
And just like you have that healing touch, just like, so you do truly, I know that's thrown around a word a lot, like, oh, people have a gift, but I think you do. So, and then I noticed Alex Dawson was talking about that on your website.
Yeah, she wrote a really sweet thing when I moved from LA to San Francisco about adjustments. And yeah, I actually learned a lot about adjusting when I took Skylar Grant's training in New York at Kula Yoga. She had someone come in, and I remember she described adjusting as, looking for the Sushumna Nadi, that central channel, and following people's breath and adjusting from like where you're seeing their breath move in relation to their central channel. And that's always really helped me in adjusting. And I also get a lot out of touch. And I feel like it's just a way that has informed me so much in my practice. And so I always love giving back in that way.
Well, you do it so beautifully. And I love that. You can, having gone through a yoga teacher training myself, like at least the 200 hour, it's so easy just to get pick apart adjustments. And technically this is how you do them. But there's something to be said for what you just explained.
Yeah.
Is really finding that energy center. So not to get off on a tangent about that, but I had to just talk about how you have a knack for healing. So, okay, so let's go back to yoga, right? You discovering it. I believe you discovered it in high school when you took your first class. Yeah. How did that feel? Like your first class, you were hooked? You were like,
yeah, it was one of those experiences that I don't think we have many times in life where you feel like, oh, that was a point in my life that really shifted where I was going. I was in high school and I was at a very academically rigorous high school called Lowell in San Francisco, which a lot of people know of who are from the area. And I was just very stressed out, and I was young and just very always worried about kind of what grades I was getting and just doing, very type A.
Right.
And a friend's mother brought me to a yoga class, which was just in a house in Potrero Hill. And I left feeling like that's all I need. That's all I remember. I just kind of looked at the sky and I was like, that's all I need. Like, I just need this feeling of being present, being in my body and my breath, and that there's kind of not other worries, that it's just pretty simple. So from then, it was really a mental shift for me. And I got into it really for the mental clarity, or the sense of just release from worry. And it also gave me that high once I started getting into classes that were a little more power flow, or something called the rocket that I got on into early on in my when I started practicing, and just how the constant flow and the rhythm of your breath, and it left me feeling high in a natural, healthy way. And I felt like, yeah, just hooked from those early years. And I never planned on teaching yoga. It was just kind of one of those things that I kept on practicing. And then we're in this time where there are a lot of teacher trainings. And I did a teacher training more as a way of, I really loved the rocket, and I loved practicing with the teacher, Larry Schultz. And I got way more into it than I was into acting at the time, which was what I was actually pursuing. But yoga kept on feeding me with what I felt was really what I needed, which was healing and a sense of peace. Whereas acting was much more ambitious and much more of that kind of type A driven thing. And it wasn't feeding me in the way that I felt like I needed. So yeah, yoga was quickly became my focus.
Right. And you had even mentioned to me that how it's counter to a results-oriented culture, which is what you just described, right?
Yeah.
So you were finding that.
Yeah, I think, especially because as I described, I was coming from this place of being like, okay, I have to get good grades. I mean, it's a longer story, but I was a bit of a rebellious youth, and I kind of took a 180, and I was like, okay, if I want to, I felt like I had to do better, I had to, something sort of shifted in me, and I was like, okay, I can't party, I can't do the things that I've been doing. I have to really just get straight A's. I have to be this idea of perfect, and it was really depressing because I started to kind of shut myself off from things that made me happy, people, and I really felt like I just had to do really well, and or what my idea of really well was. And I think, acting got a little tied up into that because I loved acting. I loved the actual act of acting, but the idea of competing and having to be better than other people, or, when I got into auditioning, it never sat well with me because I've always been like, everyone's equal and everyone should have an opportunity, and this idealistic kind of point of view. And I think yoga, for me, especially when I got into it, was like, oh, I can be whatever I am. And my teacher at the time is so loving, so encouraging. God, this is bliss. And I felt like everyone sort of felt that way in the class. And, now, funny enough, it's become more competitive in the more corporate kind of world that it's had to enter because it's become so popular, right? So
right.
it's a double-edged sword because it's beautiful that so many people are now exposed to yoga. I just hope, my wish is that people still get that idea that they can be themselves, and it's not about getting anywhere. It's about kind of being wherever you are, and that however the practice can feed you in that moment is what it's about.
Right, right. So there is no perfect pose or ultimate pose or
Yeah,
like
or kind of, yeah, getting anywhere. It's about learning, and it's about growing, and it's about building blocks, but it's really more of a way of life, of a way of being present, of noticing what's going on, of trying to create comfort or a feeling of being able to move forward even in challenges. And it's kind of about all these bigger things that, it's also really fun to be able to practice challenging poses and inversions. And I'm not saying that it's not. It definitely is, and it's fun. It's fun to get stronger and more advanced in the physical asana practice. But I find that the practice of changing our minds and becoming happier in ourselves, this has been my experience, is what has been the profound shift for me in a yoga practice. So so it's funny because now I've been teaching for a while, but and I will continue to teach, but now I'm kind of moving into also going back to school. And I think part of that is like yoga has allowed me to be more comfortable with who I am and what my kind of gifts are, or what other things I can pursue, as opposed to kind of having an end at yoga. I think it's like yoga can be an end. That can be what you're dedicated to for the rest of your life. And I kind of envision myself being dedicated to it. But I also feel like it's been this bolster, this thing that's held me up to feel confident in pursuing other things. And because it is way more of a way of life to me, and a mental space, more than it is kind of, okay, we're going to be practicing these asanas for the rest of our life, and that's all, you know?
Right, right. Well, and I think there's so many people don't realize, you were talking about the rising popularity of yoga. I think it is common thought sometimes to just assume that that means asana, the physical practice.
Right.
And there's so much more to it.
Yeah. And I think,
So,
that's how I think it's been said, but it's how so many of us get into it, which is great. And it's, for me, part of my healing practice was a physical healing. I had an eating disorder, and I had serious insomnia and couldn't sleep for a long time. I was stressed out. I was like, there were a lot of physical things that were happening that actually yoga, not just yoga, but yoga with other things, I really helped me through those physical challenges. And I feel, really happy and really healthy in my body now. And yoga was a huge part of that. So, I'm not saying that the asana part isn't totally profound. It is. But I think it's also, I think sometimes, in the more commercial outlook of yoga, it can be like, oh yeah, it's about having these pants or about this look. And it's like, no, that's like that's it kind of being a little bit morphed and misrepresented. But I also, it's kind of like I try to appreciate all of the aspects of it, but I do get a little bit sad, I guess, or a little discouraged when I find that people are there and they're not kind of being there to be in themselves. They're being there to more like check something off the list, or to, for other reasons. But I'm also like, everyone's on their path, and, it's okay. It's okay if that's how you're coming into the practice and it is something that's more a competitive thing. It's just that wasn't my experience. And so I want to keep it as a thing that feels like nurturing and healthy and supportive, and not something that feels like, oh, I need to be competitive, whether it's with other teachers or whether, like, it's not what I'm about.
yeah, no, I hear you. I hear
Yeah,
you definitely. But I love that you respect that no matter what gets somebody on the mat initially, it's the first
totally.
step. So that's,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
So go back to the topic of transition.
Hmm.
So you discovered yoga in high school. You chose to leave your acting career, correct? You just like decided to
Yeah.
shift more into yoga full time. Can you talk about that transition and how you knew it was time to make it?
Yeah, I can. So I was living in New York for a while, and that's when I did a second yoga training. And at that point, it was kind of like, oh, well, maybe I should teach a little. And so I started teaching, and had a manager and an agent, and I was still auditioning, and I was acting a bit in off-Broadway theater and off-Broadway theater, and doing some, like indie films and student films. And, I did love the process of acting. And to me, actually, what I love about acting and what I love about yoga are pretty much the same thing, which is just this sense of being very present and being in a space where it's almost like timeless. Like stuff it feels like whatever you're doing is whatever is happening, is the whole world, and time sort of stops. And I did love the connection between when you have a good actor you're working with and a good director, and this feeling of kind of synchronicity, and that everything is flowing. And it's really the same in a yoga class when you feel like the teacher is sort of orchestrating this flow and you feel in the same rhythm. And So it's actually, they're kind of very similar in the best of ways. And then, but I did feel like it was one of those things where acting kept on feeling like doors shutting or doors being really hard to open. And yoga kept on feeling like, oh, here's an open path, here's an open door, here's another open door, here's another open door. To the extent where it was like, okay, why am I not going in the direction of, less resistance? And I don't want to discourage people from pursuing things that are challenging and to say that, oh, you should just follow the path of least resistance. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that we want to be open to to the signs and to the kind of feedback that we're getting from, from other people, from what's going on in our lives. Are we always struggling, or are things always kind of an uphill battle, or do we always feel exhausted and burnt out? And it's kind of those messages that I would get that I was at a certain point I had to say, why am I doing this? And yoga was, like I said, it wasn't something that I went out to, I wasn't like, I want to teach or I want to have a studio, but these things were like, oh, these opportunities a little bit flowed to me. And then, fast forward, I did open a studio in Los Angeles and ran it with a couple other friends, teachers. And then that sort of pattern came up of, I felt like, okay, this is becoming a little bit of that struggle that's like, I love teaching and I love the community, but also I feel like there's another path for me that has to feel a little less strenuous or stressful. And it's the irony of like, oh, running a yoga studio is stressful, but yes.
Yes, I would say so. I mean, I've never done that personally, but there's so much going on behind the
So
scenes.
much going on. It looks kind of simplistic. It's like you have some walls and you have some blocks and
Right, a few
just open
mats.
a studio, right? But
Yeah, no big deal.
obviously it's harder than that. And and I kind of loved the challenges, but I also at a certain point I was like, I have to listen to how I'm experiencing life. And if I'm always hearing myself saying, oh, this is really hard, or this is really sort of, maybe that's a clue that I want to follow something that feels a little less like moving against the tide.
Right. And it can be a challenge and still be energizing you, right? And then I would think like we know that we're probably on the right path
Yeah,
because
for
it's
sure.
something that we're trying to, you know, work with and figure out. But yeah, I think we know in our gut, right? Would you say that? You just like, I
Yeah,
mean, sometimes people don't want to admit it because like maybe they've spent a lot of time or money or
exactly. And I
on
think that's
some,
the hardest thing. It's like, it's humility, and it's it's letting go of ego. Not even in the bad sense of the word ego, but I think when we're pursuing something for a long time, like I had this experience with acting, we kind of identify ourselves with that, and we say, "Oh, I'm an actor, and that's all I am," or "I'm whatever it is, fill in the blank." But I think you made a good distinction of like, if something is challenging but it's energizing and you want to wake up and you're like flying to it and you're like, this is giving me so much, then yes, it's great to be challenged. And in fact, I think that is also why I have made a lot of shifts in my life, because I'm very motivated by challenge. I don't like it when things are easy. I do like a little challenge, and that's almost like a little bit of a detriment, because I think it does push me to pursue things that I'm like, maybe shouldn't jump into so quickly. But I also think it's good to be challenged, and it's good to be inspired by being challenged. So that's all good. It's just when it feels like it's a challenge that's a little bit self-defeating. And I think you are correct with like listening to your gut. I think that can be hard to do if you feel overly distracted or stimulated all the time and you're kind of not taking time to listen. And but I think if you do take time to listen and you feel like big swells of emotion come up and that you're kind of overwhelmed, then I think that's a good indication that your gut is telling you that maybe you need to pause and kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and see if this is the life that you want to be living.
Right, right. Reevaluate the situation.
Yeah.
Go. Okay, so great stuff. Let's go on to I want to talk more about your trip to Kenya. Oh my gosh, that there's so much there. And that was just this March, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just a couple months
And
ago.
the seed for that was planted when you were there filming Tula, right? Or when you were coming back?
Exactly. It
Okay.
was when I was I think you said 2014. I think that's when I was
Yeah.
2013 maybe I was there. And yeah, we shot this film and I was I was flying back, and in the in-flight magazine there was a little little sidebar note that there was this yoga festival in Kenya, and it had a picture of a giraffe or something. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to go to Kenya, and that would be amazing to be able to practice yoga in Kenya. And it just, yeah, kind of sat with me. And then fast forward a few years later, I had a student at Hollywood Power Yoga who had moved from Kenya. And she said, probably 6 months into her practicing there, like, I have a friend who has a festival in Kenya. You should definitely go. So she kind of set me up with a friend. And I said, I would love to teach at your festival. And she said, thanks very much, but it's mostly teachers from different countries in Africa. It's like a festival kind of promoting teachers in Africa. And I said, I'd really love to come. And she was like, okay, since you're so enthusiastic, please come. And it was incredible because it was mostly teachers from around Africa. And Baron Baptiste has this foundation. I want to say it's the Africa Yoga Project. And so he's trained actually quite a number of the teachers from the Africa Yoga Project who are now in, a handful of countries in Africa. And it was so cool because I think Baron Baptiste also used to practice with Larry Schultz, who I practiced with, and they were both, it's both Patabi Jois, like Ashtanga lineage. So it was so cool to go to the other side of the world and be with these teachers who are actually teaching from a similar lineage, and just how global this practice has become and how it's gone into all these different cultures. The part of Kenya that I was in is Lamu, and I'll do a little promotion for the Lamu Yoga Festival. I think it's just lamuyoga.com, and they're amazing because their whole philosophy is bringing yoga into this mostly Muslim island, and how welcoming the people who live in Lamu are to this festival, and how it brings in tourists, and it helps their economy, and it was just an amazing experience. It was being in a very different culture and a very different climate. They're right on the equator, so it was very hot. And at one point in my teaching, that you got around on little boats that are very beautiful, and you go kind of from island to island, and there were different classes on the islands. And at one point I got very hot and I sort of passed out, and then I found out that I had heat stroke, and so I was in bed for about 2 days and like immobile. And it was kind of in that, delirium that I felt like, oh, this is a big shift. Like, I need to make a big shift. And I think sometimes when we're like literally brought to our, knees or can't really move. And
Yeah.
I've had this experience one other time in my life where I was in a very bad car accident. I think it just, it makes you realize, oh yeah, life is impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
And what can I do to get myself on the right path as quickly as possible? It sort of just like jumpstarts you. And as long as you, come back from that. So
Right.
I think that's how a lot of people are brought into yoga too, kind of from this space of being brought to their knees, and then, okay, I want to make a change. I want to make a shift. So at that point, I went to see, there were these doctors called the safari doctors, and they were traveling doctors. And they said, oh yeah, you have heat stroke. It's pretty, it happens a lot here. drink a lot of coconut water. They fresh coconuts from the trees and
Mm.
pretty delicious. So
Yeah.
that's about all I was able to keep down. And it was kind of in that time also that I thought I've benefited so much from people in the medical fields throughout my life, and just it hasn't all been a pleasurable experience, but I know whenever I go into like a medical office, I'm brought to this spiritual place of, dear God, as long as I'm okay, like I will do anything that you ask of me.
Yeah.
And I think I look at the people in the medical field at that time, I give a lot of my power to them, for better or worse, but mostly for better. Like, these people have been trained to really help and heal in very dire circumstances. And so I'm now in this path of wanting to go to nursing school. And it was in my head a little bit before, but I think that trip to Kenya, kind of meeting also traveling doctors and Doctors Without Borders, and the amazing work that people do, and kind of bringing, yeah, people
Yeah.
back to life, literally.
Literally,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. So, gosh, that's so, it's like so dramatic, but I agree. Like sometimes we need those experiences to just like kind of a smack upside the head, right?
yeah.
Like,
Sort of one of those things you don't wish upon anyone, but then,
right.
yeah, I think when they happen in the best ways, they shift you into a new perspective. And I think what I've connected with my students mostly is students who have gone through, like, those kind of experiences, or
Hmm.
are in some sort of health crisis, or coming out of that. I feel a connection with people who are struggling in that, because I feel like I have. And I also feel like yoga has helped me heal in so many ways, but there are also these other methodologies of healing that are very vital for people, especially in, more life or death circumstances. And so I think my kind of whole mission, if you will, my dharma, I think, is just to heal and to help people in need. And that starts always, as cliche as it sounds, with oneself. I don't think we can really give back until we're learning how we can help ourselves, and how we can get through the things that we find the most challenging.
Yes, so true. And I know it's cliche, but it's the old secure your oxygen mask first
Hopefully, yeah,
before
yeah.
before helping someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that is such a good point. Well, and Caitlin and I sincerely hope that none of you listening find yourself in a life or death situation, or
Me
something as
too.
dramatic as
Yeah.
that. But I think, I mean, a lot of what you're saying is resonating with me too, because I was in, well, actually hit by a car.
Oh my goodness,
Um,
honey, I remember that. I mean,
yeah, the
yeah.
pedestrian part of an autoped,
Huh.
which I don't recommend to anyone. Um, but I feel like I had one of those moments too. Like I was just forced to be in bed for a good amount of time just to heal physically from broken bones and whatnot. But I kind of like felt like when I surrendered into it and took that time to really not just heal physically, but to reevaluate a lot of things in my life. So that would just be my little addition of 2 cents. Is like if you
Yeah.
do find yourself in something, or in the middle of Kenya having heat stroke,
Hmm.
um, use it as an opportunity to, I guess, see what those next steps are and see if you feel like you're in alignment and what's next. But
Yeah, I think
yeah.
and it's interesting, because I think the common thread there is that you're forced to be still, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You're forced to, it's like you've lost your capacity, and it's true. It's like, without your health you don't really have anything, because you can't really function if you're not in a healthy body, healthy mind. So it's kind of like, when you don't have that, you are forced to be still, and it it really it kind of forces you to reevaluate. I'm repeating what you've said, but I do think the common thread is finding stillness, and it it would be the if I have any advice, whether or not I'm one to give advice about transitions, is it really would be if you're looking to make a transition or feel like you're a little lost. And the number one thing is just creating space for yourself where you actually can listen. Because I think when we get scared, if we're unsure about a transition we want to make, or are just in a part of life that feels a little overwhelming, which I've been in, it's the hardest thing to do, but to stop and start to become really honest with listening, maybe first to your breath, first finding like a meditative seat, and then just becoming really honest with what you need or what you want. And if probably it's not really aligning if you're in that space of feeling overwhelmed with what's already going on in your life. So just becoming very honest in the shifts that you think you need to make. And for me, that was challenging just because I think throughout my life, and I think a lot of people have this, is they have a story of what they should be or what they think they should be. And then it's hard to unwind that story if it's played in your head a lot. So I think it takes this kind of shutting down devices, getting into nature, getting into wherever you feel a sense of connection to your inner voice, and listening in and being honest. And it is really hard to do without doing that. I think it's hard to listen in if you're going on autopilot, or if you're just moving through things really quickly. I think it's hard to hear that quieter voice.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And you are, by the way, authorized here. I'm authorizing you to give advice on transitions, because that's why you're here on the show. But seriously, that is such great advice, is just to quiet down. And let's talk too about, you touched on it a little bit, letting go of fear. Mm-hmm. Right? You and I have talked about that. Mm-hmm. And that can be hard to do, but it's so necessary, right? Because like when we are in those places, you were talking about, when we get into those places of fear, I mean, it can be easy to react from those places, which
of course
isn't necessarily, well, not necessarily, like I would argue pretty much never in our best interest to be acting from that place. But it's one of those things that's easier said than done, like just let go of the fear.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
It's okay. And like, it's like, all right, well, how do I do that? So do you have some tips or advice on how to do that?
Yeah. I mean, here, what first comes to mind is that reacting, while it's not necessarily in our best interest in most parts of life, just kind of working from that instinctual, unless we're running from a tiger,
Right, of course,
but
yeah.
it is also human. So I think part of the process of like whatever it is you're shifting or changing is to realize, okay, that makes me really angry, or that makes me really frustrated, or that makes me really jealous, or whatever your things are that come up, and to realize that emotions are totally good. They're totally natural. They're totally human. But then you want to try to be able to move beyond that, just whatever your kind of reactive ways are. And to me, what's been helpful for me is, especially with fear, is getting really honest with what I'm scared about. Because I think there was a time in my life before I started to get into a more kind of recovery and healing mindset that I really thought I was fearless. But I really think what it was is I was just stupid. Like I was a little bit like just thought I was invincible until that. And to tell you the truth, that car accident was really what shifted for me, was like, oh, I'm not invincible. Like I could die, and I am not always going to be in a safe place. And I have to take care of myself. And so I think what I had to do was get really honest with what my fears were. And if people who are listening are familiar with the 12 steps, the 12 steps really helped me, because one of the steps, the fourth step, is writing an inventory of your fears, basically. And I think not until I did that, like I got so clear with what I was afraid of. And it's the most kind of funny, mundane fears would come up. And for a moment, it was a hard process, because I think when I first did that, I became afraid of everything. Like I became afraid of my shadow because I realized, oh my God, I do have fears. And then after that, after like, and it was a process. I won't make it seem easier than it was, but kind of after moving through like being afraid of everything, I started to actually build real confidence and real strength because I started to learn how to take care of myself and how to, how to just be human in a way that was both vulnerable and courageous, or that's how I hope to live, you know? And
Right.
I think you have to get honest with your fears so that you can know how to move through them. And, you know, there was a funny experience I just had recently where two teachers invited me to go rock climbing with them because I teach at a rock climbing gym at Planet Granite here in San Francisco. And I was like reluctant. I've done it in the past, but I don't really like it because I have vertigo. But I thought, okay, I'll give it another shot. And on my first climb, I was like halfway up the wall and I looked down at them and I just started to feel dizzy and nauseous. And I was like, I want to come down. They were like, no, do it, do it. No, I want to come down. No, you can do it. You can do it, Caitlin. And then I was like, no, I really want to come down. And I did. But then on the next climbs, I did, you know, climb to the top and hit the little, you know, buzzer, if you will, at the top and came down. And I think part of it is just like you have to be okay with being like, okay, I'm not ready. Okay, that's still scary. And then you have to kind of listen to the support that you have. And, you know, in yoga and meditation, we're like, you know, feel your feet on the floor, feel grounded, you know, get the support that you need from friends and start to make your way inch by inch up the wall, you know, and I think that's the only process. Like, I don't think there's an easier way of moving through fear than actually moving through it and being like, I'm scared and I don't have to do this. But then maybe you choose later, oh no, but I want to do this, because I think at the other side of fear is this feeling of more opportunity. It's just like this feeling of, oh, now I have this whole other vista. I have this whole other range that I can move into. Whereas before I felt like I was in such a smaller place. So I think the rewards are big, but you know, it can be challenging, but it's whether kind of, I guess it's how much you want to get into a bigger space or another mindset. I think it takes, I think one has to be willing, one has to want it. Otherwise I don't think it can happen.
Definitely. Yeah, it's worth it, but you kind of just have to make that decision and be committed to it and be willing to make those incremental steps, like you said. So
Totally.
yeah, I did a post recently.
To fail a little bit, you know?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's like, I think that's the secret to life, right?
Yeah, it is. You're right, Connie.
It's like, be okay. You heard it here first. No, I'm just kidding. No. I know I'm definitely not the first person to have said that, but I mean, it is true. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we push those limits. Or as I like to say it, I don't know, I thought of this. It's like taking a road trip out of your comfort zone. You just have to, maybe you don't have to go far, but you need to go a little bit and then a little bit further. So excellent. No, those were some really great tips. So, oh gosh. Okay. So do you have I guess we'll be taking a break. I'm trying to look at this go. Do we want to take a break? Do you want to come right back? Let's take a quick break and then come back with rapid fire. Any more tips that you will have, and also a little sneak peek into what's ahead for you. But let's take a quick little break and we will be right back. Badass Girls Unite. Want to be part of our inner circle? Head on over to ladyballsradio.com where you can join our VIP mailing list, check out the show notes for each episode, and access free bonus content. You can also head on over to our Facebook page, Lady Balls Radio, to join in the discussion, get updates on your favorite guests, and hear who's going to be on the show next. Okie dokie, we are heading back to the show. And we are back with Caitlin Talbot, all about transitions. Oh my gosh, so many great gems so far. Thank you so much. So, I think this is a good time to kind of just recap a little. We've covered so many great points, but transitions, helping people navigate or initiate sometimes, just even getting started is the challenge. What are some, I know you've already kind of mentioned them, but let's just do like a few solid tips people can just follow, take away, and get started on that transition to either get going on it or make it not necessarily easier, because we know it's not going to be easier, but feeling more supported and feeling more confident as they navigate their way.
Right. So I think, there are so many different personalities. And if I could kind of break people like in an Ayurvedic way of like three
Right.
different main categories. So I feel like there's some people who transitions are like, for me, it's almost like I like transitions. And then once I'm in the next stage, it's like, oh, wow, I've made this transition. Now I have to like cover the details. So I think for me, I see bigger picture and I like change. But then I forget like, oh, this is going to be an emotional experience and this is going to, entail that I have a lot of shifts to make. And then there's some people I think who are, it's like, going against the current, and it's like it feels strenuous to make transitions, and for those people, I would think that just becoming clear with remembering why you're making a transition, and knowing that all and every emotion might come up, and that's okay. It's kind of part of the process of feeling scared or feeling sad or feeling elated or whatever. Everything is going to come up, and I think it's important to remember that it's okay to feel this wide range of emotions, and it gets easier as long as you have this kind of insight of why you're making a transition and it feels right. You've kind of trusted that in your gut. And then there's, I think, this third group, like, do I even want to make a transition, and how do I make a transition? And I think we've touched upon that a little bit, but I think I do think it's about I've said it, but quieting down, listening in. I think it's easy for people to feel like, oh, I'm okay where I am, or this is how I am, and I think I just want to encourage those people to even think in really small ways how they can open their lives to feeling more full or more. I don't want to say happy, because I don't think that's the end game in life. I don't think it's about being happy. I think it's about experiencing things and feeling, content with all the ups and downs, that it's all part of the experience. And I think, I guess it's just about getting really honest with yourself. And I think for some of us, that's kind of, for me, it's kind of like I'm always trying to learn more about myself. And I feel like I'm a little bit obsessed with that. And I'm not encouraging everyone that they have to, keep investigating themselves. But I feel like, it's the unexamined life is not worth living. It's like, we want to keep on learning about ourselves so that we can keep on moving forward. So I feel like we're never at this space of being like, oh, everything's okay. Like the only constant is change. We're always changing and evolving. And I think to act like, no, we're not, like these things are set in stone, is kind of not accurate. It's not like following nature. It's not, things die, I'm actually just starting a hospice volunteer program. And so I've been like thinking a lot about death and the great transition. And I think what's so amazing about hospice is it's creating this, like, it's neither trying to change the fact that we die and that this is kind of what happens at the end, but it's about making that process just really like feel supportive and feel a sense of ease in that transition. And so I think with all transitions, it's like that. It's like, it's painful. Transitions are painful, or they can be. And I think, to act like they aren't isn't accurate. But I also think the getting to the other side of where you're wanting to move is so, for me, it's like it's part of life that makes life feel so alive, that it's not always the same. It's changing. And I love feeling surprised by life and that I don't know everything. And I feel like, I don't know, that's the kind of inspiration I would want to give, is just that sometimes there can be so much more, and not to feel like you have to stay in a box or you have to
Yeah.
stay in one way of being.
Yeah. And you've even said you've come to expect the unexpected, even
Totally.
welcome it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is a little leap too, but I think it's a game changer if people can apply that. So
Yeah.
excellent. All right. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it, Connie.
Okay. Spirit animal.
Well, my spirit animal, I've heard that these can change. So I want to say that in the past, I had a funny experience of a hypnotist coming to my yoga studio and leading through this hypnosis of finding my spirit animal. And it was a very beautiful, he put crystals around, and it was a gorgeous ceremony. And then at the end, I opened my eyes and he said, "What's your spirit animal?" And I said, "A beaver." he started we started cracking up, or I did, and then he was like, "No, the beaver, it makes so much sense. They build the houses, they build the dams, you've just built a yoga studio like there." And it did make a lot of sense, but I found that hilarious. And most recently I've kind of gone on my own spirit animal journey, and I've decided that or I've had a vision of a horse, and I think horses are representative of freedom and friendship. They like to be in packs. And I feel like for me, those are kind of the two most important things to me right now, are kind of my freedom to discover what's next in my life, and needing the support of my friends and my family and my loved ones, not being alone. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the best analogy too. And I honestly, I see horse way more than beaver for you. So
I'm so amused by, like, why a beaver? Why did that come to my mind? But it totally,
it did. And I can just
standing there.
picture it too, the crystals and the whole setup, and then culminates with that profundity, right? Like, oh my goodness. Okay, spirit fruit or vegetable? I've expanded this one to include fruit because sometimes people stick it in there. So.
Yeah, this one was a challenge for me, Connie, but I think I have to say a tomato, just because since I was little, tomato soup was like my favorite food. And I feel like tomato is like in a lot of different cuisines, and I feel like comfortable in a lot of different cultures. And I feel like I still love tomato, and it is a fruit, but people think it's a vegetable, and, make what you will with that.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I love it. You put a lot of thought into that. It is so versatile and willing to change, right?
Yes, and so delicious.
So delicious. So delicious. Okay, favorite song to belt out at karaoke?
It would probably have to be Fiona Apple, because in my angsty days, like, I used to belt out Fiona Apple all the time. So you could go with Criminal, or you could go with some song off her first album,
Okay.
Sleep to Dream.
Perfect. Angsty. I love the angsty. I can't imagine you as angsty, but I get it.
It was
Right?
before the healing powers of yoga, Connie.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. You are gifted $1 million to give away as you see fit. Who gets it and why? And you can split it up. It doesn't have to go all to the same
Okay, well,
place.
if I can split it up, the first thing that came to mind was like some sort of preservation. In My mom's from South Africa, and I've been to the game park there, and just the animals are so incredible. And I feel like so many of our animals are endangered now. And I mean, I know there's so much happening in our world now, but I
Yeah.
feel like that was the first thing I thought of. So I would love to create some sort of habitat for elephants and rhinos and all the animals that are really kind of being massacred right now. So, yeah, that was my first thought. And then, if I could split it about, I'd probably give some to my family since they've helped me a lot through my life, and probably keep some for myself, put some in savings because I'm very practical.
Good for you. Gift it right back to yourself. That's actually a
Yeah.
good one. No, I like it.
Thanks, Connie. We have to put on our oxygen mask first.
Yes, that is like an example of that. That is so perfect. But I love you putting it in savings. It's not
Yeah.
like, like
Not
now
for
we're going,
spending. Yeah.
right. Yeah, now we're going to go on a little shopping spree.
Right.
All right. Well, those are all really good ones.
Thanks.
Very, very good ones. Okay, what is your superpower?
To heal the world.
Yeah.
Have a wand.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, it would be.
Kind of do though. Going back to what I was saying earlier, you have a knack. You've got like, I don't know, special Shakti,
Thanks.
that energy that is coming through. So we just did a whole show on Shakti. It hasn't aired yet, but
Oh,
I don't know if it's going to be before or after when this airs. But you
great.
do. It is very very healing. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, last question. What is the ballsiest thing you've ever done?
So, since I did have a rebellious stage, I have a lot of stories, but then they do kind of reflect back to me as being a little bit, from stupidity and just not being very. So, I think the one I'll go with is, I think really the ballsiest thing I've done is admit that I have a problem when I have had problems, and to get help. I do think that takes kind of the most courage. But just to leave you with a little bit of an adventure story, once I traveled to India, and I got in this tourist trap, and my whole plan to go to Rishikesh was turned on its head, and I flew up to Kashmir, and it was at a time where the border of Pakistan and India it wasn't such a great time to be there. And also on my flight up on this little rickety plane, I read in my Let's Go India book that you should not go to Kashmir to these houseboats because the people bring you onto the houseboat and ask for your money, and they don't bring you back until you give them money. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And so I had met a friend from Spain who was there with me, and we had to basically run away, and we didn't know where we were, and we had to go to we ran away. The servant told us where a little town was, and we ran away to the town, and it was all Muslim, but women in burqas and hijabs, and I was the only Westerner felt very exposed and felt very out of place, but got onto this bus, and it was the scariest bus ride I've ever taken. It was up to basically K2. You could see.
Oh my God.
I mean, you could see K2 in the distance, but multiple times during that bus ride, I thought that it was going to fall down these massive cliffs. And, luckily I lived to tell the story, but it was, I think that escape route was one of the ballsier things I've done.
That is pretty badass. I will have to say.
I hope I don't ever have to do it again.
But wasn't it just a little bit exhilarating?
Just a little in the aftermath.
In the aftermath, like I did that, and I'm still alive.
There was a lot of prayer at the time of. But.
I can imagine. Oh my gosh. Oh, and I just have to say too, this is like I love what you said about like it turns out I wasn't fearless. I was just stupid.
Yeah.
Like so.
So to all the kids out there.
To all the kids out there, yeah, just take note. I know you might not believe us,
Yeah.
but trust us. That's a good one. That is such a good one. All right. Well, what's up next for you? I'm like so excited. You're starting. I mean, not necessarily when this airs, but like at the day after we're recording this, you are starting nursing school. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, Connie. It's a little jumping the gun because I still have some prerequisites I'm doing because I was a literature undergrad major, so right. I have a lot of science prereqs, but I'm starting chemistry tomorrow, which is my most sort of the class that I'm the most afraid of.
Yeah.
So I'm starting this whole. It's just another kind of example of I do feel like how life is to me. I do come to expect the unexpected because if you had have asked me this a year ago, no way in hell I would have thought that I was A, going back to school, B, wanting to take like a chemistry class, and I feel very excited about it. I feel like I'm ready to kind of, use another part of my brain that has maybe been a little bit dormant over these years, and to move into this next kind of path of nursing. Hopefully, that's what I'm thinking right now.
That's what you're going for. Well, I consider
Yeah.
you starting tomorrow because that's like chemistry is no joke.
Yeah.
So
I don't think you take chemistry to, for laughter or for fun.
no, I don't. Yeah, wouldn't it just be a blast? Wouldn't it like be
Although,
so
do you want
fun?
to hear something funny?
Of
So I
course.
I had to, get a couple classes long-term subbed because I'm taking this chemistry class. Turns out the person I asked to sub my class said, "Sorry, I can't sub your yin yoga class because I'm teaching chemistry in Marin, which is where I'm taking chemistry. It's not the same class, but he
Right.
used to teach chemistry." So I'm like, "Wow, that wasn't expected."
Yeah,
So
that's kind
he's
of a
like, "If you need
trip.
a textbook, yeah." Anyway,
Huh.
very
That's
funny coincidence.
yeah, that's totally a trip.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Well, where can people find you if they want to connect
Well, I'm
more?
in San Francisco now teaching,
Right.
and I have a website that usually posts my class up to date. It's just my name, CaitlinTalbot.com. And, I'm also on Facebook, so you can, yeah, find me there.
Cool, cool. And one more thing, I know I was going to ask this earlier when we were talking about some concrete tips. Is there any, I know this isn't necessarily stuff you can just learn from a book or check off a checklist, but are there any like go-tos that you keep going back to that would be helpful to people in a time of transition or maybe a little self-doubt about it?
Like
Like a
books.
book or
Yeah.
yeah, something that they
Well,
could
I love
concrete.
Pema Chodron. She's like Things Fall Apart, and or she has a lot of books that are about kind of being in times of challenge or change. She's a Buddhist monk, and
Right.
so I love her. I also, what do I go back to a lot? I actually more accumulate a lot of books. There's not one that I go back to, but Light on Life is great, and Iyengar. And, I feel like there's so many good yoga books now. It's hard for me to zero in on one, but I think just, yeah, I think, I do think that's a good way of helping one through a time of change is reading and listening to others who have gone through those experiences. In a time where I was suffering from a lot of depression, The Noonday Demon by Andrew Solomon really helped me. And I just empathize with people who are in spaces of depression because I think it's one of those places where it's really hard to get motivated to change because you think that change isn't even possible. You're just so in. So The Noonday Demon, I love for that, and yeah, kind of different books for different experiences I've had. But those are a couple that I'll leave you with.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and I know I kind of sprung that on you,
Yeah,
so way
no,
to way to think on your feet.
yeah.
All right. Any last minute closing tips
I
before
guess
we
I just,
finish up?
wish everyone luck who's listening to this, who does want to make a shift and is either having trouble with that. I guess I just say that, even in challenges, things do change. And so as long as you're able to just stay kind of in the moment and keep on making even baby steps, like you can get to another side. I think that that's what I'd want to leave you with, and just to keep on the path of, if you have a yoga practice or if you have any practice where you can find some sense of listening in and finding stillness and keeping a support network, because I don't think you can make big shifts on your own. Even if your support network is like a higher power, but just having this connection of being supported by something is very important.
Definitely. All right. Well, it's a great way to wrap up the show. Caitlin, thank you so much for being here with us
My
today.
pleasure, Connie. I love Lady Balls Radio, and I feel like I love someone who's wanting to expose women who are working on their life path, and that support and that encouragement is greatly appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'm just so happy that you're a part of it. You're part of Lady Balls Nation.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Oh.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you, dear listeners, for being here with us today, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye.
Psst, wait, don't leave. Not quite yet. Why? Because I want to invite you to be one of the very first members of Lady Balls Nation. That's right. It's officially launching next week, but you can be one of the first in the door. So all you need to do is go to ladyballsnation.com, sign up for our free VIP mailing list, and we will send you the exclusive invitation. Hope to see you on the inside. Live your truth, baby.